McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40, on the way, knuckleball. He got it!
How is everybody doing on this fine Thursday night? Now, of course, I had a little bit more time because there was nothing intriguing on unless you found that a 44-point spread between Louisville and Murray State was rather interesting. My name is Colin Bashnagel, Bash the CFB show on TikTok, or the guy that Rico knows is clearly just trying to target, despite the fact that I only have 1/10 of his following, and that's okay with me. Like, I'm not overly prideful with being small. Somebody's got to start somewhere, and I'm starting somewhere. So that is my name. That's who I am. Okay. And my opinions are very valid. Now let me address this just real quick. Rico knows, of course, saying that the whole entire "you don't matter," and which I didn't draw too much attention to, and it was a comment when I was just trying to, treat him friendly. One of his videos came up again. I don't know why he keeps coming up. Came up again on my For You page, and I made a comment talking about how I had Duke ranked number 24 in week number 1, which I did. And you guys can go back and see that in my previous videos. And he was like, "You don't matter." And that's just the latest example of Rico trying to dog on me, despite the fact that he has really nothing of substance, including the whole entire thing about Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. There's no substance to what he's trying to dog me on. So the bottom line is this: Rico, you coward. You got about 130,000 followers at this point on TikTok, and I've never even seen your YouTube or whatever, never really pursued looking it up. And you're collaborating with CF Budge. So anybody that's CF Budge, a big TikTok account, which I'm not even sure how big CF Budge is, you're collaborating with him with a podcast, bringing his following, some of his following that doesn't know of you, over to you, which is very smart, by the way. And you're entertaining. And I have always said that, and I've always held that, regardless of what I think about your opinion, and regardless of what I think you do, you're entertaining. You're doing a great job in entertainment. And that's the only thing you can do. You are doing nothing immoral other than you're just trying to attack people just to attack people. Why? Because they have a different opinion than you, because they have a different perspective than you. And you always have to be right. And you are fearful, Rico, of being incorrect and being proven to be incorrect. You want to make your cult-like fan base believe that you have a 100% efficiency when it comes to your takes and opinions, that you're never wrong. I hate to break it to you. Nobody other than the Lord himself, as I am a Christian, and if you're not, that's okay. But to me, other than the Lord himself, nobody on this earth has ever walked the earth and been perfectly correct in everything that they do. All right, now that that's out of the way, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. And let's go with this week 1 preview. What you guys are all here for, I'm assuming, the Tuscaloosa takeover for Texas. We'll talk about that coming forward, but let's get that bottom line ticker rolling. So you're going to see it down below, and as you can see down there, and I'm going to fix that real quick before we get too far into it. As you can see, it's based on my top 25. We'll get to that later. It's based on my top 25. So whatever my poll says is what we're going to go with. And again, I messed up something. It's fine, though. We're working through it. Whatever my poll says is what I'm going to go with, but that's only going to be until we hit the college football playoff. I'm not, egotistical at all when it comes to my poll's better than your poll. But I do think it's got more validity to myself than the AP poll. I truly don't care about the AP poll. I truly don't care about some of the AP voters' opinion on college football because they don't watch it. And the only reason I really care about some of the playoff committees' rankings, or the playoff committee's ranking in general, is because of the fact that that is how we decide a champion at the end of the day. If we didn't, and it was just another poll, then I would care about it just as little as I do the AP poll. But all the spreads are listed down below, and we're going to talk about everything. And if you guys have any questions about my rankings or about any of my opinions, comment down below and we can discuss it. I'm all for open discussion, and I will be all over TikTok this weekend looking for some discussion. All right, Illinois on the road at number 20, Kansas. Now, again, I do want to reiterate with what you got in Reggie Love and then also what you got in Josh McCray. I think this 1-2 punch, though they don't have the dynamic runner that Chase Brown was, I think this 1-2 punch is a lot more dangerous than a lot of people give credit for. I don't think Illinois is necessarily missing that. What I think happened to Illinois is I don't think Luke Altmaier, at least right now where he is today, is as good as DeVito was. And specifically in the play action pass game. That's off of one game in a sample size against Toledo. But by the way, against Toledo, I found out that that defense is not the same. And that defense is good, but it is not shut down good. Hold Michigan under 20 and nearly beat them good like they did last year, albeit Blake Corum injury, but Donovan Edwards is no slouch. So with that being said, does Illinois have a fighting shot in this game against Kansas? 100%. Jalen Daniels, he's supposed to be coming back. And as much as I like Jason Bean and as much as I think Kansas will win with Jason Bean, I think that Kansas, and I think it's -3, not -2. I think that Kansas is just the better football team. You guys can see I got them ranked number 20. I had them in my preseason poll. I am super high on Kansas, just like I was pretty high on Duke and put them in the top 25 when nobody else did. And Duke proved me correctly, albeit I did it with Texas Tech. I had Texas Tech high. I bit the bullet with that, though I don't think we'll talk about Texas Tech later. But I think the Kansas Jayhawks are the better team here. This offense, like I had beat the drum of when I did the Kansas preview, they bring back 7 of the returning 8 top receivers from last year. 3 wide receivers out wide, headlined by Luke Grimm, their tight end, Mason Fairchild, and Devin Neal, a great back who's very versatile. And they have a great running threat, but also an efficient quarterback in Jalen Daniels. I think if Daniels is healthy, they're a really, really good team, and their ceiling is potentially contending for that Big 12 championship. With Jason Bean, they're still a really good team. And even if they're a little bit off of the Big 12 championship, they're still a dangerous, dangerous team. No matter who starts at quarterback, and it's looking like it's going to be Jalen Daniels, give me Kansas, and I have them covering. All right, Notre Dame, number 10 in the country in my poll, and I think they're actually number 10 in the AP poll as well. Going on the road to NC State. Now, this is the first test. NC State, for starters, had kind of a weird game against UConn. It flew by. UConn kind of, slowed down the game, and it was low scoring. 24-14 was the final, but the guy who stood out was that guy on your screen right there, Peyton Wilson. The dude is just an absolute stud. I talked about him in the UConn NC State preview that I did, which I was able to do an extended preview for Thursday, Friday night's games, and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday combined together. So I did 2 separate videos last week. This is one video, so we're narrowing down the games. But I think this is one of the better games of the weekend, and it's at a slate at noon that is relatively weak. This should be getting the primary of attention. I get it. Ohio State fans, and I'm going to the game, by the way, with Ohio State and Youngstown State. I'm going to be paying very close attention to NC State, Notre Dame. I'm going to be watching it a couple of times back, too, on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Bottom line, I'll be watching it at least twice through that, because especially if it's a good game, like I think it could be, 7.5 feels like it's a little bit too much. I think this is a close game, a defensive slugfest. That's why the over-under set at 50.5. I feel like Vegas doesn't know which direction this is going to go. But the problem I also have is this. Robert Anae is a great offensive coordinator and a great offensive mind, but their offense did not click against UConn, albeit it did do better than the scoreboard indicated. But with that being said, you still got to score some points. And I don't think they were necessarily holding too much back for Notre Dame, but they also knew that the big game against Notre Dame was on the horizon. This is a dangerous game for Notre Dame, one where they don't need to look ahead. Am I going to play this game? Absolutely not. I'm a little bit leaning towards a 1-score game with NC State covering, but I do think Notre Dame controls it. I do think Notre Dame wins as the better team, but Peyton Wilson, number 11, the linebacker, outside linebacker, guy to watch for. He had the game-sealing interception at I think a fumble recovery, if I remember correctly. That was like a week ago, and we've had so much college football since then. But yeah, 10 tackles, eight of them solo, 3 of them for a loss. I mean, he's crazy. And then Notre Dame, I worry about their speed on the outside. I think this could be a defensive slugfest. I also think that this could be a game that gets away from NC State, which is why I'm not going to play it. I think NC State's good enough to cover. Will they? We'll see. All right, my number 19 team on the road at the number 18 team. Tulane, big-time win last week, absolutely stomped South Alabama in a potential look-ahead spot where they're not taking South Alabama. Seriously, credit to Willie Fritz for getting those boys up and saying, hey, this South Alabama team, they won 10 games last year. Kane Womack's got a good squad, and they have a really good defense, but I feel like we have the right game plan to have success. They put up 37, beat them 37-17. Ole Miss, coming off a game against Mercer where they were not challenged at all, put up crazy amounts of points. This is going to be a fun game. There is not going to be a ton of defense, specifically on the Ole Miss side, and I just don't think Tulane has the athletes to cover Ole Miss. Ole Miss, a little bit more balanced this year because I feel like they're going to have better quarterback play. I think the competition was brought in to improve Jackson Dart, to make Jackson Dart look over his shoulder. There was an emphasized conversation about who was going to be the starter at the beginning of last year between Luke Altmaier and Jackson Dart, despite the fact that Jackson Dart is the much more talented kid. It seems like a lot of Luke Altmaier slander. Luke Altmaier, I'm sure you're a great dude. That's all I'm going to say. And I don't mean to slander you or hate on you, but the bottom line is this. Jackson Dart, a lot more talented than anybody that's come through that room, including the Oklahoma State transfer Spencer Sanders. And yet, I think that competition was built so that way Dart would get better. And I think it kind of worked. Now, how much can you tell against Mercer? I don't know. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Ole Miss is going to pull away with this game, and I think this offense is going to click. What keeps Tulane in this game is the same thing that kept them in the game against USC, and they end up pulling out an upset against USC because of this. That defense for Ole Miss is a little bit suspect, and I think Tulane's offense can have success. They build off their momentum that they gained last year in that Cotton Bowl. They looked very good against a solid defense at South Alabama. I think Tulane could potentially keep this close, but I think Ole Miss I kind of think they cover. But I think they got more talent and they have the better team. I think their offense shines. Texas A&M. On the road at Miami. This is a game that's going to be the litmus test for what Texas A&M in 2023 is going to be. Not necessarily the fact that they have to go on the road to win. I am still not sure what Miami is. I had a lot of mixed messages from that Miami of Ohio game that they played last week. Miami, Ohio, a team last year that, did struggle to 5 wins. And they also are not, a terrible team, though, at the same time. Like, this is a team in Miami, Ohio, that they did not blow out the water, but you could kind of see why that could have happened. Now, Miami, with that being said, the Canes did not look impressive. So did a lot of teams that did not look impressive that we know are probably going to be really good teams. Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, etc. Like, these teams are going to be really good teams, and they struggled as well. So was Miami kind of mailing it in, waiting for this Texas A&M game? We're going to have to see, but this is a game that Texas A&M needs to go on the road and win. This is a game that Texas A&M teams that are good, but 8-4 is probably their ceiling. This is a game that they go and struggle in. I mean, we remember what happened in the Rose Bowl against UCLA, the ultimate collapse. They were up 44-10, end up finding a way to, or 41-10, whatever it was, end up losing that game in the Rose Bowl. This Texas A&M team needs to absolutely put their foot on the pedal and dominate this game from start to finish, no matter what the scoreboard says. Everybody needs to leave the stadium thinking, man, that Texas A&M team, they are a lot better than this Miami team. Because at the end of the day, what Miami's ceiling is completely different than A&M's ceiling. A&M's ceiling should be contending in the toughest conference in America. Miami's ceiling should be being competitive, but not necessarily contending in the toughest, or in like the third or fourth, probably fourth toughest conference in America. That's the bottom line. So when you talk about this, there's levels to this stuff. You need to be able to say, hey, maybe we're not going to dominate and overwhelm a team like Miami, but we are able to go on the road and control the pace of the game and win this game with our talent. I think their defense is really good. Connor Wegman, who's on your screen right there, absolutely looked fantastic in week 1 against an inferior opponent. He looked pretty good towards the end of last year against some good teams. He needs to do it yet again for Texas A&M to give a lot of Aggie fans and just people around college football some hope that this is going to be a great team. Overall, I have Texas A&M winning and covering. Number 9, Texas on the road at Alabama. Number 3. Is this going to get tough for me to pick? The answer is yes. This defense for Texas is going to come out, and they're going to come out firing against Alabama, and they're going to dare Jalen Milroe to throw the ball. And guess what? I'm not sure if he can. He looked really good against Middle Tennessee with deep balls. If you adjust for what your preconceived notions were of Jalen Milroe in this quarterback room, you didn't see those preconceived notions come out against MTSU. And MTSU has been a decent, not great, but decent G5 team. And that's not a team that you look at and you look at that film and you'd be like, well, it's just MTSU. A lot of people are doing that, and I hear you on that. But trust me, like, Alabama can gain some value from that game. Now, the value you can also gain from that game, they have to be able to throw the ball, or they have to learn how to run the ball, because they had no run game outside of the quarterback run game at all against MTSU. And that's a massive concern for their offense coming into this game. As far as their defense goes, I am going to be very curious to see how well Texas's receivers do against the secondary. You have Terry and Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry back just to add a little bit of levels to this. Of course, they added Jaden Key in the transfer portal to help in that secondary. They have a kid in Caleb Downs that you absolutely need to expose the youth of if you are Texas. And most importantly, you need to stay ahead of the sticks. And what I mean by doing that is you're not going to be able to run the ball on Alabama. I'm pretty sure of that. We'll talk about it. But you need to make sure that you're not getting tackled for a loss. And you need to make sure that you're at least getting maybe like a little bit of a push forward on this Alabama team when you decide to run the ball and get the occasional breakout run for about 10 yards. That's what you need if you're Texas. You don't necessarily need to run the ball for 5 yards of pop against Alabama. 3 yards of pop will do it if you can get a little bit of efficiency of not getting tackled in the backfield, so staying with the chains, and also being able to break out those occasional longer runs of about 10 yards. If Texas is able to do that on the ground, and Quinn Ewers needs to show up, and all the pressure needs to go on Quinn Ewers' shoulder. Am I going to bet on Quinn Ewers? It's hard for me to bet on Quinn Ewers, but I do definitely think that Texas covers the 7. I think that this is a close one. I think it's low scoring. I love the under in this game. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, because of the fact that I do not trust Jalen Milroe to beat Texas with his arm in a low-scoring slugfest, one that maybe you wouldn't expect in Tuscaloosa in 2023, I'm going to go with Texas to barely pull it off by a score of 20-17. Similar to last year, very similar to last year, but I do think that Texas comes out on top this time. Number 8, Oregon on the road at Texas Tech. Very tough loss for Texas Tech in the mountains of Wyoming after a weather delay. You got up 17-0, and then you get shut out for the longest time. I mean, you're talking end of first quarter was 17-0, I'm pretty sure. And then you went until 41 seconds when you tied the game with a game-tying field goal. The offense failed to move the ball. And I feel like this offense can definitely play better. I feel like they will play better against an Oregon defense that does still have some questions. So does basically everybody except for maybe Oregon State in the Pac-12. Oregon, on the other hand, it's not like Texas Tech's defense played poorly. This is going to be a significant difference between playing Portland State. But that significant difference, you scored 81 on Portland State. So, is it going to be enough? I am leaning towards the under in this game, and I feel like the matchup is really, really good for Texas Tech to be able to cover. because of the unknown of Texas Tech. Here's the thing I'm going to tell you guys. Do not fall into this trap of saying, oh, Texas Tech lost to Wyoming. They are not a good football team. We've seen this with some of the better teams in the Big 12. Last year, Kansas State, Big 12 champion, they lost to Tulane out of conference. The next week, by the way, Tulane lost to Southern Miss. But I'm telling you this right now, or maybe it was the week before they lost to Southern Miss. I'm telling you this right now. Wyoming is a pretty tough G5, even if they're not Tulane level. And if you want further proof of it, by the way, Louisiana in 2020 beat Iowa State, who ended up becoming runner-ups in the conference. This Texas Tech team is still dangerous. They're still really good. And just because they lost in double overtime to Wyoming, because Andrew Peasley just played out of his mind in overtime, doesn't mean that they're a bad team. Can't take them lightly, Oregon. In the preseason, I picked Texas Tech to win this game. I am leaning towards Oregon right now to win the game, Texas Tech to cover. But, man, not one bit would I be surprised if Tech wins this game. You got to take them seriously if you're Dan Lanning in the Oregon Ducks, especially a weird place to play like Lubbock. Oregon wins. Texas Tech covers. I'm going to lean towards the under because that's a pretty high total. Whoa. Okay. So that's just a friendly reminder, I guess. We might have skipped a game. I don't care. I think I forgot to replace that slide though. But hey, here's a reminder of what happened, by the way, last week. Number 25, Wisconsin on the road at Washington State. Washington State plays great defense. Okay. And they did this same thing last year. And guess what? In week one, I'm not going to go all Rico knows on you, but week one, I was 100% spot on with what I thought Wisconsin would be. Great front seven, struggles in the secondary. Buffalo was able to throw the ball a little bit on Wisconsin. If you watch the tape, I don't even know what the stat breakdown, the box score was. I'm not a box score fan, though. If you watched what happened in that game, Buffalo had big plays in the air, and they just didn't have the athletes to really separate, per se, through the air. But they were able to keep up with Wisconsin because they were able to be a threat through the air. So, throwing the ball, a little bit of a danger for Wisconsin. You got to watch out for that because Washington State, guess what they do? They throw the ball. Cam Ward, over 350 yards last week against Colorado State. What else does Washington State do well that goes against what Wisconsin does well? They stop the run at a very high clip. Now, they play great defense as a whole, but this game is going to be in the hands of Tanner Mordecai. And do I trust Tanner Mordecai? No, not as far as I can throw him. This is a tough road trip in Pullman, Washington. Weird things can happen up there in September for sure. We saw it with USC and Sam Darnold the year after they went to the Rose Bowl. They lost up there in Pullman on a Friday night. This is going to be a Saturday night in Pullman, Washington. Very tough defense led by Jake Dicker. And that's going to be something that Tanner Mordecai needs to navigate because Braylon Allen, he'll get his, but he's not going to run all over. Ches Malusi not going to run all over this Wazoo front. I am definitely taking the under in this game. 58 is way too high. And I am also definitely taking Washington State, not just to cover. How about you put some on that money line? Wazoo. I've been saying it since the preseason. Nothing last week told me otherwise, like the Texas Tech-Oregon game might have, not just on the Tech side, but the Oregon side. Washington State tells me they are going to pull off the upset and beat the Wisconsin Badgers. This is one that I am absolutely all over. Give me the Cougs at home. All right, well, before we get into Walk That Line, I thought I had another game to preview, but we're just going to do this whole entire here, I'm going to keep that there. We're going to do this thing that I'm going to call Rapid Rundown. We are going to go through all these games in FBS that just pop up to me. So I'm going to pull up ESPN here. If you can't tell, that's ESPN. And I'm just going to rapidly go through some of the games that just catch my eye, starting with Utah and Baylor, just real quick. touching on each individual game with like 15 seconds to spare. I am concerned about both teams. It looks like Cam Rising might be able to play in this game and Brett Keithy might be able to play in this game. I do think that Baylor is going to put up points, though. I think they present a different challenge, specifically just being able to actually block somebody on the offensive line that Florida presented on offense. So I think that though Baylor is going to have a little bit of difficulty running the ball, I think we can trust in Sawyer Robinson a little bit to be able to throw the ball. Now, if you guys aren't caught up, Blake Shapen got hurt last week against Texas State. So I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor wins this game outright. In the preseason, I picked Baylor, but man, at Texas State, GJ Kenny, he flipped that entire roster, and they are a lot better than a lot of people expected, which is why they pulled off the upset, because they're probably a lot better than Baylor expected. This game is going to be a lot higher scoring than you would think with the two logos, Utah and Baylor, specifically the Baylor identity that Dave Aranda and Matt Rule built in 2019 and 2021 with great defense. But this Baylor defense, a little bit down. This Utah secondary, a little bit down. I think that points will be scored in this game. I do think Utah wins at the end of the day. I'm not really going to pick against the spread because, you know what? If I had to pick against the spread, it's Utah -8. I'm going to go against the public here and take Baylor +8. I think they keep it close. Troy and Kansas State's a very interesting game. I definitely think Troy can cover, and John Somerville has a very good squad there. But I think Kansas State kind of learned their lesson a little bit with Tulane. They get scared a little bit, and they end up winning this game, pulling it out by about 10 points. So I'm going to take Kansas State to win. Colorado and Nebraska. How about this? Nebraska's secondary definitely going to be tested a little bit more than they were because Callie Ekmanis is not nearly the quarterback that Shedeur Sanders is. I don't care what PJ Flex says. At the end of the day, I do think Colorado wins, and I got something on this game a little bit later. Holy Cross is going to beat Boston College. Holy Cross has not lost a game in the regular season since 2021, okay? They lost last year, and they were pretty competitive against the FCS national champions, the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. And Boston College is coming off a pathetic loss where they got controlled the entire game, was lucky to send it to overtime, and they looked horrible on offense against Northern Illinois. And I honestly think that Holy Cross is probably a better team than Northern Illinois. You throw in the old rivalry aspect of it, that Holy Cross is definitely going to play up and maybe catch a little bit of headline, a little bit of mention, because nobody really knows anything about Holy Cross, despite the fact that they went undefeated last year. Holy Cross is 100% beating Boston College. I can't find a spread on this, but I did hear that some books that I don't even know of has Boston College favored by 17. Absolutely not. Holy Cross is winning this football game. All right, what other games catch my eye here? Iowa State, slugfest. We're used to it. I think Iowa gets it back. The Cy-Hawk Trophy. They lost it last year. They were able to win it back in 2021, but lost it last year. I think they get it back. Interesting game is going to be Texas State, by the way, and UTSA. Even though Texas State put up a ton of points, UTSA didn't. But UTSA played pretty good defense. Jeff Traylor's a really good coach. I'm going to take UTSA to win, but Texas State to cover the 13.5. I don't think Vegas has fully adjusted to what GJ Kenny has there, but I do think UTSA wins that ball game. North Carolina, App State, that's going to be a lot of fun. I just think App State is not quite the team they were last year, not even close, actually. So I'm going to take the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover. It's up to 19 right now. I would still take them to cover, but I'm a little bit more hesitant on that. SMU on the road at Oklahoma. We'll get to that a little bit later. I am not high on SMU this year, and Oklahoma looked great in week 1. I will say, though, again, against a bad Arkansas State team. All right, any other games catch my eye? I got more on Jacksonville State Coastal later. I got more in UConn Georgia State later. Just a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a hint, and it's not going to be that much later. Eastern Michigan, Minnesota. I got more on that. UCLA, San Diego State. This is going to be a trendy upset pick. I think San Diego State, what they did against Ohio is a little bit of fool's gold. That offense kind of broke when Curtis Rourke, not just from a standpoint of, oh, crap, Harris, the backup quarterback, is not all that good, but the mentality just completely died for Ohio, and Ohio still almost pulled off that game. Clearly, Ohio's not the same team without Curtis Rourke as far as just at the very least the leadership standpoint. UCLA's defense played pretty well, and Idaho State was able to put up some points on San Diego State last week. Stay away from this spread, but if I had to pick, UCLA minus 14.5. Anything else that jumps out here? Auburn and Cal. This is going to be the last game I talk about here. Auburn and Cal. This is a game that's going to be very dangerous. Now, I do like the talent that Auburn has. They dominated UMass, which is not a horrible team like they were last year. They are significantly improved. But UMass was able to run for about 5 yards per carry against Auburn. Meanwhile, on this other side, you have a lot of guys coming back from a senior latent team for Cal with a good head coach. I still think in Justin Wilcox, who's just with the wrong program. At the end of the day, I think Cal could potentially win this game. I'm not going to pick it, but my gosh, if there is a prop out there for Jaden Ott before the game, I haven't found one, but Jaden Ott over in rush yards, slam it. He went like a $170, albeit it's North Texas, but a $170, and Auburn struggled to stop the run against UMass. Again, that game got out of hand pretty early, but UMass was able to run the ball with some success against this Auburn team. Does this mean that Cal 100% will have success on the ground? Absolutely not. One game is a small sample size, but that's what their identity is going to be, the Cal Golden Bears. And Jaden Ott's a really good player. I'm going to take Cal to cover and potentially pull that money line, especially if I have a good day. All right, here we go, fellas. Walk that line with me. We're going to go through this and call it a day. 3, 2, 1. All right, Friday night. Let's get those lines. Kansas, I am 100% confident that they cover that -3. I'm hopeful that they do that. Jimmy Horn Jr., over 68.5 receiving yards. I feel like they're going to do a decent job of taking away what Travis Hunter brings to the table at Nebraska, but I also don't trust their secondary that much. Shador Sanders does a great job of extending. Robinson's out for the first half. That's a part of it. And I do think Jimmy Horn Jr. is wide receiver 1 for Colorado. A lot of people are ignoring that. I think he's the best receiver, and I think he's going to go off yet again. I think he could potentially hit 100 yards in back-to-back games here. I think that the quarterback run game for Brennan Armstrong is going to be an emphasis. He ran the ball for 96 yards against a very solid UConn defense. And Notre Dame, with a great linebacking core, similar to what UConn brings to the table, it was a good preparation for that game. The quarterback run game ended up vaulting them over the top. I think about 50 yards is right around what Brennan Armstrong is going to bring to the table. And also, by the way, if you're worried about sacks, Notre Dame's pass rush is a big concern for Notre Dame going into this year. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get Brennan Armstrong for a crap ton of sacks like they maybe, or a lot of people may be expecting when you see that under total of 35.5. Well, maybe Brendan Armstrong gets sacked like 3 or 4 times. That pass rush is not supposed to be elite for Notre Dame. JMU, UVA, take the under 40.5 points. I think JMU wins this game. I think there's a good chance Virginia covers, but Virginia is not going to score a ton. I mean, this is going to be a slugfest if I've ever seen one. This is going to be like 16-7 if JMU covers, 19-13 if Virginia covers. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be gross. 40.5 is an absolute low number, but I'm willing to risk it for the biscuit, take the under, say that Virginia scores less points than 10. I honestly think that's going to happen with the backup quarterback going in there and that offense that looked pitiful anyway against a bad Tennessee defense. Oklahoma, -16.5 against SMU. That's down to 15.5. This is in our right direction. Take it. I think they win by 3+ touchdowns. I am not buying the Ole Miss. I am not buying the SMU Mustangs right here. CJ Baxter, under 36.5 yards, though I think he's a really good player. Jonathan Brooks is clearly running back number 1. He barely hit this total against Rice, and I think Texas as a team is going to have a very hard time running the ball against Alabama. Get it while it's still an option because they might take this prop off. I think this is an absolute steal. I'd be shocked if CJ Baxter even sniffs 30 yards in this game. The only way he's going to be able to do that is if he gets 10 carries. Against Rice, he had only 5. I bet you he's going to have 5 or less again against Alabama. Eastern Michigan, +20.5. Not only Eastern Michigan, +20.5. How about you guys be a little bit ballsy here? Take Eastern Michigan money line against Minnesota. Now, maybe Minnesota learned their lesson from the loss to Bowling Green last year, but you're talking about a team in Eastern Michigan. First off, what happened against Howard? They won by 10 points. That game was never really in doubt. Howard ended up coming back, and Howard was able to kind of run the ball a little bit on them. So that's a little bit of a concern for the Emu Eagles. But with that being said, Samson Evans went off against Arizona State last year in the big Power 5 win that they were able to pull off on the road. It was the game that got Hermit fired. We know about that. And Samson Evans was the star of the show that night. And I think they're going to play a lot of ball control. This is the case, by the way, for the spread. If Minnesota controls this game, they control this game and win it, 27-10? That sounds like how Minnesota wins this game. I think their defense, Minnesota's defense, is very elite, but I really don't trust in Kaliak Menace and the fact that they don't seem to have much of a run game. Their offensive line does not necessarily seem like the best offensive line. Like, I think that Eastern Michigan is going to be able to hold Minnesota under 20. I think that keeps them in the game, and I certainly think Eastern Michigan wins this game, and I think that this is a play that you're willing to risk. I mean, it's like plus 920. At least that's what I got it at, plus 920. Maryland, minus 24.5. A little bit of a gamble, but I do think they're so much better than Charlotte, and I think their offense is ready to display with Talia Tagovailoa. Air Force, minus 13.5 against Sam Houston. This line is pushed down because of the fact that Sam Houston's defense played great against BYU. It's a different animal going up against this triple option. I think Air Force puts up at least 24 points in this game, and I have a hard time seeing Sam Houston get above 10 points in this game. Even though I do like what Sam Houston is doing, I think it's tough. Hard-nosed football, that's not necessarily going to get them far. I'm taking Air Force minus 13.5. I don't bet against the academies, but I'll bet on them. How about this? We got another slide. We got 5 total here. UConn plus 2.5. I'm taking the money line as well. I think wrong team favored on the road at Georgia State. Coaching for his life right there. Danny Granger, not impressive. They should have lost to Rhode Island last week. I can't imagine that UConn's offense doesn't have a little bit of success against this Georgia State defense. And by the way, UConn has a great defense themselves. Wrong team favored. UConn wins outright, 2.5. Give me that for just a little bit of extra comfort. UCF Boise State, I'm taking the under 60.5. I think the run-first mentality that UCF could bring to the table against a very good defense of Boise State doesn't add up to a ton of points for UCF. And I also think that Boise State's offense is going to have a difficult time mustering up more than like 24 points. So I think it's going to take, a UCF blowout to be able to hit this over. And I don't foresee a UCF blowout in this game at all. The spread is close. I didn't want to play the spread, but I'm definitely going to take the under. Washington State plus 6.5. I like them outright. This is another underdog that I really, really like. Those are basically my 3 big underdogs: Eastern Michigan, UConn, and Washington State. Guys, at least play against the spread when it comes to this. I think all 3 of those teams are going to win outright. Washington State plus 6.5. That's a lot of fun. All right. Jacksonville State, Coastal Carolina, 2 run-heavy teams. And I will say, one of them is coordinated by Tim Beck, a Jacksonville State offense that doesn't look that great, getting 59.5. I think this game is like a 23-17 type of matchup. I think it's going to be a fun one for sure in the Sun Belt, but I'm going to take the under in this game. Florida State minus 31.5. I think they absolutely smoke Southern Miss. Southern Miss is a decent team, but they are nowhere near the level of talent that Florida State has. I think Florida State drops 50 on them at minimum. This is not a close game, guys. Not at all. Oklahoma State minus 3. I kind of wavered on this a little bit. Oklahoma State was not impressive against Central Arkansas, but Arizona State was even less impressive against Southern Utah. I feel like this is a young Arizona State team with more of a project than Oklahoma State. And what sold it for me, by the way, was the fact that Mike Gundy's on the sideline for Oklahoma State. And though I like Kenny Dillingham, I think he's got a little bit to learn. All right, so that does it for Walk That Line. We are 6-8 on the year, but there's a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time for us to make up for it. So, guys, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. There's our full week 2 predictions. And again, I just ask that you guys make sure to check out my TikTok that is right down there that I just mentioned, Bash's CFB show. With that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys great weekend of